Afternoon, everyone, with the Big Bash SuperCoach season kicking off in 6 days and 7 hours here on my screen. We're pretty excited about it, and I'm going to be going through just a little bit of the recent news that has come out and just my thoughts on how we should be playing things heading into round one and looking forward to that first couple of rounds, especially with really the keen eye on the first 4 rounds, with 3 of the teams have 2 doubles across that time, and there's plenty of others that aren't very relevant through that time at all, especially Thunder and the Hurricanes. So the most recent news is the news that we do have Khan coming over to the Renegades in there at 117.5k, Hassan Khan there, and plays in the US, so he's got a little fun resume on him. Bat and bowl as well. Should come into that side pretty close to around the Will Sutherland position there in the batting lineup, and should be able to get some good bowling in. He's got some really good recent stats where with a bunch of sort of 20s and 30s in some of these T20 games, high teens, and then taking some decent wickets, the odd game where he doesn't take a wicket, but a lot of 1s and 2s in there in his 2020 comp. So he's going to be a fun one with the double in round one. And the news with him, minimum it'll be the 3 games with Bethel being out, but if Bethel sticks around and plays a little bit more for England, I think it could be a few more rounds. There's a little bit of chat that he might just be there longer in general. So that's the interesting news from the Renegades, who are a very important team in round one. For the Stars, we do see Adam Milne get signed. He's not in the game as yet on the bowling side of things, but they're a team that are struggling a little bit for bowlers, and he's locked in for the first 3 games, with Osama Mir being the replacement player for him for that 3 games there, and you can lock him in as a bowler for those 3. But I suppose that just the biggest thing with that is how it affects guys like Pete Siddle, how it affects Joel Paris and these types of players there. So we'll just do a quick run through of the teams that we want to be looking at and making some big decisions on those guys. So the Stars are the most important, clear as day. They've got the double in round 1 and round 3. So starting with these guys is going to be of most importance. And we do see a couple of relevant guys in the wicket-keeping slot. And if Sam Harper's named round 1, I think that 35% ownership will be pretty fair, and it might get closer to the 50% mark. And then you've got Joe Clark. It looks like at a minimum the 2 games, so the first double, but maybe round 2 as well. But you miss out on him for round 3. So he's one of those guys I think you're using for round 1, and you're likely selling from that point anyway. And when you look at his recent form, it hasn't been that great. And he is playing against that incredible Perth bowling lineup in that first game. So something to note with those guys. And if it's Harper, probably isn't the worst shout if he's batting in that middle order against this awesome bowling lineup, because we know he had a tough one last year. But at 58k, if he happens to be in that starting side, if we do have Maxwell out, or however that one plays out to begin, then he could be a guy that you do just slot in at that cheap price and hope for the best. Last year I bought him at the beginning at 130k and it wasn't too great. But that's the wicket keeping slot. We're still waiting on news, obviously, with Glenn Maxwell. It might just be all the way until that first team is named, half an hour, 40 minutes before first game there of the round. Thank God, Stars are playing first up. You can make your decisions on that. But if Webster's clear to play, I think we need to select him. Tom Curran, I think, is a must-have as well. And then you're looking to some of their batters in Hilton, Cartwright and Rogers. And I think just basing it off which one of those guys gets near the top of the order, we know that Hilton Cartwright is likely to be 6, but if we do see Maxwell out and Hilton's in that sort of 5 range or 4, that could be a pretty interesting one. If he went ahead of Stoinis or something like that, then that could be interesting. And I do think Stoinis is someone that pretty well everyone is going to have in their sides. He's a 61% now, and I just think that the form that he's in right now, if he brings any of that to the Big Bash, then he's well underpriced as well. So I think all of these guys could be selected. I'm not expecting the world out of a Rogers or a Cartwright with their type of roles, but they could definitely help you out if you need another player in those slots. And you've got Merlot and Campbell Kellaway that could get an opportunity, but probably unlikely at this point, unless you definitely see Maxwell out and they don't pick a Harper with Joe Clark being there to begin. And just remember, they've got Ben Duckett to come back along with Osama Mir after the first few games there. And from the bowling slot, it is basically those all-rounders that are still of the highest importance, and then it's a couple of those cheapies. And a few of us, like myself, are looking at Paris and a Mackenzie, who I think that they could do some decent work there. Mackenzie had a good little start to his campaign, and then had a bit of a slower sort of ending to the campaign last year of his 4 games. Paris was pretty rough in his 9 games, so by no means any of these guys, Peter Siddle, Steckity, all had sort of tough campaigns last year. By no means are they slam dunks, but when there's doubles on the line, there's points on the line, these guys could be of interest, that's for sure. One thing you do need to think of is after round 1, you have a bunch of trades to make, potentially boosts as well. So you do have to trade someone out. And you're looking at stars players and you go, well, I'm probably not going to trade them out. Renegades have the buy in round 3. So they're actually a team, if you are, a lot of us, myself included, are worried about having these Renegades bowlers, having 3 or 4 of them to then have to worry about them having a buy in round 3. If you're stacking your team with stars, with Renegades, with the Adelaide and the Perth Scorchers boys who have the double in round 2, then you are going to have to trade someone out, right? You're going to have to trade 3 or 4 guys out of your side. So maybe that's where having Renegades guys to start is actually a pretty good play, because you can sell them after round 1, their first double. You're removing them so you don't have to worry. You can have a couple of them for a buy to loop, but you don't want too many, because if you have some non-playing guys like a Salzman or a Jake Doran, these types of guys, then you may have too many guys sitting on your bench that actually aren't playing, and you have a rough time of things getting players on the park for that round 3, or getting a full 12 anyway. So they're a team that you can actually use for the round 1 double, and then potentially sell a bunch, and then keep 1 or 2 for buys, and then have them ready for round 4, and you could trade in some Adelaide guys and some Renegades guys for that round 4 clash, especially when you got a few guys like Bethel and these players back from their international stints. You can slot them in from that round 4 and keep 1 or 2 of those guys that are making some good cash, that have a good round 1, for example, in those cheapy bowlers and the like. But if it is those bowlers, the Fergus O'Neills, we'll just quickly slot them, pop them up on our screen right now with the Renegades boys. If you're looking at Tom Rogers, you've got Hassan Khan, Fergus O'Neill, you might have a Will Sutherland in there. He did bowl the other day actually for Prahan in their local first grade T20s. Kane Richardson, Zampa. If you've got a bunch of these guys like that, you do have to be aware of trading those players out at that price and having someone of similar value that you can move to get a suitable replacement with a double from the Adelaide team or a Perth Scorchers team. So be aware of that, unless you have some cash in the bank, which can be helpful as well, as we know. So there's a bunch of those guys. A lot of them are of relevance, and obviously Hassan Khan you can pop into the batsman slot, which I think is helpful in this scenario. But there's definitely some value for those guys there, and I can't believe Bethel is that cheap at 117. I wish he was. If he was here from round 1, he'd be an absolute lock in our sides as well. A few things to think about with their wicket keepers and their batters. So Tim Seifert at 152k, it's pretty expensive. That's probably the main problem with Tim in that slot, but he can definitely fill a role in that wicketkeeper slot, because if Harper isn't playing, Tim's the only guy that is likely to be there for the whole season, whereas Joe Clark isn't, of those guys that have a double in round 1. So if you want someone that has the double in round 1, then I think Tim is likely to play, unless you're using Clark as one of those guys that I mentioned that is going to be moved on to another keeper, whether it is a Josh Inglis in round 2, whether it is moving to a Josh Philippe or something like that who has a double in round 3, or to Jimmy Pearson or one of these guys that have a double in round 3 as well. So there's a few things to think about with those types of plays as well. So go through that. But then if you're looking at batsmen, I really love Laurie Evans. He just is really out of form at the moment, unfortunately. You look at guys like Fabian Allen from Adelaide, just to pick a few guys that are a little bit out of touch at this present stage. And even Josh Brown, thankfully, I think he got some runs in one of those T20s in Victoria on the weekend as well, thank goodness. But he's been out of form as well since the finals from last year. But you've got a few of those batters in there, Jake Fraser-McGurk, Laurie Evans, that can all come out and absolutely crush it, and then they could be trade targets for you. And at a better price of near that 130 mark or 136 for Laurie, they could be guys you could move on from, and they could come out and do a really good job. and score plenty of points for you. And Josh Brown's another one of those guys at 112 that could be held or moved on, dependent on how things go. So that's the Renegades and the thoughts around them. I think you do keep probably 2 post round 1. If you start with 5, you're probably selling 3 of them. If you're starting with 4, it might be 2 of them, and whoever else you got, or an injury, or a guy that just doesn't perform, and you're like, oh, their role's not very good. That's probably how you want to play those Renegades guys. If we're looking at the next teams on the list, Adelaide is that squad. And from a wicket-keeping perspective, you've got Harry Nielsen, who's likely going to be in there. So I don't think we can start with Harry. It doesn't look super enticing or inviting, that's for sure. So we move on from them, I'm pretty sure. You can't select or start with any of those guys. But Matt Short's the big one. If Maxwell's out, I think there's still a really good, it would be a really good decision to start with Short. You don't have to worry about getting that cash available for round 2 to get him in. And just another guy you don't have to worry about trading in. And you can see who the guys that do well in round 1 or have a lower break even. Maybe it's someone from the Heat or the Sixers who have a double in round 3 that you could slot in. And just be aware, guys, that after round 1, every team still has 1 double remaining from that point, apart from Adelaide, who have 2. So Adelaide are an important target for round 2, obviously. And then you've got all the other teams still have a double to come. So picking guys that have a double in round 3, round 4, could be really good for your sides. It's not going to push you back any further from having enough doubles or the same amount of doubles that you could have if you brought a double guy in round 1 or a double guy in round 5. They're still going to get that extra game for you unless they get injured or something like that. So just keep your thoughts on that one. But Matt Short's going to be interesting. Who picks him, who doesn't? Jamie Overton with the gun roll in this side at 207k. You're paying for what you get with Jamie, obviously. Chris Lynn, if you want a bit of a point of difference, he's a guy that you could start with instead of like an Overton. But yeah, personally, I'd go for a Jamie. Just has he's got my name. Simple as that, basically. We won't see Ollie Pope for a little bit. Travis Head at 130 is wild, hey. But Fabian Allen, as I said, he's just been a bit out of touch at the moment. But if he gets that decent batting slot closer to 7, probably after Jamie Overton there, and then can bowl some decent overs, he could definitely come out and do really good, obviously. But then you got some of their cheaper guys. It would really only be if like James Basley was given a role as bowling a couple overs, batting sort of 7 or 8. That could be an option. He just didn't play anywhere near as well last year as he did in previous years. And you've got guys like Weatherall, Darcy Short, had solid seasons last year and are priced accordingly. I can't see them going much better than how they have been. And then the bowling slots, you've got a few guys to look at. And I was having a little gaze at guys like Cameron Boyce at 19, just under 120k. It's not the worst price, but it shows that him and Lloyd Pope had really nice seasons last year. Henry Thornton's a guy that we all likely want in our sides. Under 100k seems in a good space there. If he can stay injury free, he's going to be a fun one to own. And then does Doggett get the spot? Is Buckingham going to be fit? And I'd like to have Jordan in my side on the bench there at 39.5. But if he's not there round 1, do you go into it with him and hoping that round 2 he gets picked? There's a few question marks, obviously, to answer around that one. But yeah, I think Doggett's an interesting one if he gets a spot at 71k as well. Over Jordan, you might have to pick him instead. So that's Adelaide. They're a really, really special team to stash a few guys away on your bench or in your start, whether it's an Overton or a Matt Short. You'd likely, to pay that cash, you want to start them, unless something goes crazy there with certain players and you have to do some looping. I think you want to be starting those guys, and then you have a couple of stashed away on the bench as well who are going to be helping you for round 2 and the doubles in that week. Moving along to the other most important side, and that is the Perth Scorchers. So for Perth, wicket-keeping slot, looks like Inglis is going to be released, most likely, to play in those ones. And I suppose the only thing there is if Kerry had some type of problem, some type of injury, then Inglis would be pushed back into that side. And that's something you have to worry about. It's very similar to, let's say the guys that are on the fringe for Origin. Is like, are they going to get selected? Is there going to be a injury or something like that? That's the situation that Inglis, I think, is going to put himself in, just with how well he's been playing in the Shield stuff. So, it could be in the middle of a double game and then you lose him. It could be that, but that's hopefully a low percentage chance for those that are selecting him, and there's 28%. So he's a really fun one in the wicket keeping slot if you have the cash and you're preparing for the round 2 double and you're more comfortable grabbing him over a Seafard or something like that, then that could play. If he's out, which unlikely at this point, Matt Hurst would come in, I think would do a really solid job in that slot. Now the big question is, in the batting position, Aaron Hardy, do you select him if there's a chance that he bowls very low overs? There was it's an interesting stat that some guys put out there that in the games where they had their 4 big dog quicks, the Richardson, Tyres, all the like together, that Hardy bowled very limited amount of overs. And they did have a few games where he wasn't able to show his full potential with the rained out games and stuff like that. So, that 60 average includes a lot of games without many overs. There's a few games at the back end where he did bowl a good chunk of overs. So it's a bit of a mixture. It's not like, you're picking him at this price point knowing that he bowls most games, because he doesn't. It's kind of a 50-50 if he's going to be bowling 1-0 or like a 3 or 4 overs. But Hardy, we know, is one of the best batters in the comp. So that's some opportunities with Australia too. So that's going to be helpful. And then you've got guys like Finn Allen. Are you selecting him as a bat only guy that's 25k cheaper? Do you slot him on your bench, or do you wait until round 1 and see how he goes and pick him from there? We've got some injury news out of Perth, which is something to monitor. So there's so much in this Big Bash, pre-season. It's crazy. With Cooper Connolly definitely out for the start, along with Ashton Agar. So they're 2, all-rounder left-arm offies. And then looks like Ashton Turner is going to miss the start as well. So there's a good chance that you're going to see some guys like Matt Spores, who's an all-rounder spin bowler as well. Like, is a good chance that he comes in, but how long is he going to be there for? Is it just that one round? Does an Ashton Agar or Cooper Connolly or Ashton Turner come back and take his slot away? So there's probably too much to worry about there. Or do you slot someone like a Keaton Jennings on your bench there in preparation for the round 2 double? 117k opening for a really good team in the Perth Scorchers. Is that a better play for your side? Something you need to think of. Do you stash away your Jason Berendorf or Lance Morris at that 148 and 161 price tag? Or do you go for Ty at 140 or Jai Richardson at 130k, coming off a high 5 re-subluxing his shoulder? But Jai, incredible bowler to watch, man. When he's on, he can swing it both ways. Like, what was it, like probably 60, 70 centimeters, like that he was moving it since it was leaving his hand. Absolutely incredible bowler. Just watching that, like before he did his shoulder, just the wickets that he took were absolutely incredible. So do you slot a Jai Richardson on your bench there and hope that he's good to go for that double in round 2? They're the big question marks for those 4 teams, and you can easily fill your whole 17 players from those 4 teams. Do you want to stash a good all-rounder like a Jack Edwards? Do you want to stash Sean Abbott? Do you want to play Jimmy Pearson? Do you want to have like a Matt Renshaw, a Curtis Patterson, these types of guys that are scoring well in sort of 50 overall grade or Shield cricket at the moment? Do you want to slot them on your bench and get set to have one of those guys, or have some cash cows for round 3? There's a few question marks for you. I think there's no exact way to do it. The flex position, I think you just got to use it as is. Some people, I've thought about using it just as locking in your vice captain early, or just locking in a guy that is maybe their bowl only or bat only. Just pop them in there and leave your all-rounders to move around. There's the decision, I suppose, to, if you are looping, then you can keep the flex position open for using that position as a guy that you can move around later. If you're trying to do some looping, you're like, I can I can slot someone down to flex and do some looping to get my batsman score from the bench or a bowler score from the bench. There's a few things like that. It's probably all I'd want to think about at this point. And I think we'll leave this video there. Just going through those 4 teams, they're the really important ones. They're the ones you want to look at. I deleted my squad there just for this video because it's too hard to work out at the moment. But Hassan Khan has just come into my side. I think he's going to be really cool at 117.5k. I think you've got to slot those guys in to have the really nice role, and we'll see how things are going with someone like Sutherland. But the word from Maxwell is he needs to be running it at full pelt, I think, and they might give him a game off or that first double off and get him prepped for sort of round 2 and 3. And they've got a bunch of games on in a row there. So that's going to be important for him. So it's going to be interesting how this plays out. But yeah, collection of those 4 teams, and then obviously the other 2 teams in Sixers and Heat, maybe stashing 1 or 2 of them can work out well. Also, you want to start well in your sides. The reason you want to stack your teams for that first couple of rounds is more for the fact that if they can get a couple of good games under their belt, their prices start moving, and you can build a really strong team quicker than if you were to slot in a few, if you were to buy an Abbott and you were to buy a Jack Edwards, their price moves a little bit slower and you get the points a little bit less, and there's chance for them to get injured in that first couple of games. There's a few factors that come in that can kind of cook you a bit. So that's more the theory with getting guys early, especially a bunch of cheapies and whatever else, that you can get their price starting to move and things can start going well for your side early, rather than waiting and hoping for things to go better from round 3 and 4 and make up the ground that you've left in that first couple of games because you've got a few extra double guys in around 3 or 4. Very interesting the way this is panning out, and it's going to change every single day. We're 6 days out, and I'm sure we'll have some more news in the next couple of days there on different replacement players. And so I think the Renegades, for example, still have 2 slots on their roster, unless that was the Stars when they signed Milne. I think it might have been the Milne one. I'm not sure. Either one, I was looking at both of them today, and one of the articles said that the team had 2 spots available. So we're still going to have time to find out about all that stuff, which will be cool. But there you go, guys. That's my video today, and we'll have a couple more before my team reveal on Sunday, on the day of the first game. See you guys.